I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is executive coach, empowering founders in business and in life. No other than Mr. Andrew Pauls.
Great to be with you, Daniel. Thank you for that great introduction.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Andrew. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes, so I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm an executive coach, especially for first-time founders, men and women who are running their first company. And I have been a professional coach for over 22 years. I've worked with over 10,000 people globally, both on the personal side of relationship coaching, health, mindset, and mental health, as well as executive coaching in the domains of business growth, development, strategic planning, sales, et cetera, et cetera. And so what makes my practice a little bit different, Daniel, is that I understand that a founder's development and their business growth are like a flywheel. And if either one of them stops, then the other one stops as well. And so the focus of my practice is the whole person, the whole founder, not just the business person, but the person who also shows up at home and parents their children and is in a relationship with their spouse or their partner. And I find that by supporting people with the whole of their life being in balance and being powerful, their businesses grow faster, they grow more gracefully, let's just say, with less struggle, and that they're able to have fulfillment without too much of the sacrifice of things that really matter. And I say too much because I think a lot of people say, hey, you can do this and not sacrifice anything, but that's just not true. When you're up to anything big and you say yes to
Yes,
that, you're saying no to something else. So the question is, how do you bring all that into balance? And that's really the focus of what I do with my founders.
indeed. You always sacrifice something for success. Mr. Andrew Pauls, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with the world. So let's talk about your upcoming book, Over the Gate. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so in 2021, in December, as I do every year, I was looking at what kind of theme I wanted to come up with for my year. And what I came up with for the year of 2022 as a theme for the year was accomplishing something deeply meaningful and seemingly impossible. And so I wanted to use the year to try to push myself to go beyond some of the places in my own life, personally and professionally, where I felt limited, where I could see other people doing things that I really respected, but that when I looked at them, for whatever reason, I thought I could just never do that. And I wanted to really push myself past those limiting beliefs I had about myself. So I created this theme for the year. And I was reading a book at the time, which I highly recommend for your listeners, called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. Are you familiar with that book, Daniel?
No, not yet.
It's
But
a
I, for sure, if you will recommend it, I will read it.
fantastic. It's a great read. But in that book, there's a story inside the story about a city in the United States called Leadville, Colorado. And it's a city that was dying when its primary industry died. And then someone brought it back to life by creating a 104-mile long foot race up in the Colorado Rocky Mountains. So they're over 10,000 feet of elevation. That's over 3,400 meters of elevation at the starting line. So I read this book and I was fascinated. And my wife and I sat down one night in January to watch what we thought was a documentary about this foot race. And as we sat down and watched it, it turned out it wasn't about a foot race. As luck would have it, it was about a mountain biking race on the same course. And I had just started mountain biking for fun, but not for fitness. And as I watched these men and women ride their mountain bikes in the Rocky Mountains for over 104 miles, I said out loud to my wife, I was like, that is crazy. I could never do something like that. And she turned to me and said, what are you talking about? You could absolutely do that. And then I turned into kind of a jerk And I looked at her and I laughed at her. I was like, babe, you don't even ride a bicycle. You have no idea what you're talking about. I could never do anything like that. And I was not being humble. I was 100% convinced there was no way in the world I could possibly do that. And she grabbed me by my shoulders and looked into my soul. And she said, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. If you really wanted to do that, you could do it. And Daniel, this is one of those weird things, right? Here I am in December and I come up with this theme, but I don't have any specific goals. And then here we are in January sitting on the couch and my wife says this thing to me. I have no plans to ride my bicycle 100 miles in the mountains at all. It's not even on my radar. I was thinking this would be like in business, something around growing my business. And all of a sudden my heart started to race and I started sweating and I'm sitting there on the couch like, what is happening to me? Like, am I going to all of a sudden take on 100-mile mountain biking race? And that's how the whole thing started. It literally started on the couch with my wife watching this video. And so the book chronicles the transformational journey that I went on in the 18 months that it took me to successfully complete that race. The first year that I attempted it, I failed to complete the race. And the second year I attempted it, I completed it. And along the way were many lessons about things that had happened in my past that left me feeling very limited as a person in life that I didn't know were there, that had to get dealt with for me to successfully train and complete the race. And that's what the book is about. And it's called Over the Gate because on the day of the race, the second time, I was sick. So I was going so slowly through this race, just dealing with being sick up at altitude, that by the time I finished the race organizer had left and he had closed the gate that led to the finish line. So in order to cross the finish line, I had to climb and put my bike up over the gate. And then I had to climb over the gate in order to be able to ride past the finish. And I selected that as the title because I had to do that many times over the course of that 18 months to get up over some gate that was blocking my way forward. And that's what the book is really about. It's not really a biking book. It's not really about that. It's really about the process of taking on where you feel limited as a human being, and yet you have these dreams that come to you about things you want to do or you want to accomplish. And what is the process of going from the person that you know yourself to be today to becoming the person who can do those things that call to you. That's what the book's about.
Well, thank you for sharing that thought, Mr. Andrew. I hope it will publish soon and we will support you for sure. The title suggests a specific location is crucial. How does the setting, or whether a literal or metaphorical, shape of your story?
Well, I just think setting it's crucial because intrinsic in the setting are the seeds of either those things that entrap you or that pin you in, so to speak, but they're also the doorway out. So I'll give you an example of one of the little stories from the book where setting was really crucial. One of the things that I talk about in the book is that when I went into high school, which for any listeners outside the United States, those are the 4 years of schooling from when you are the age of 13 or 14 to the age of 17 or 18. And in the United States, when you go to high school, it's usually the first time for many kids of leaving behind a school where you know almost everyone and going into an environment, so a setting, to your point, Daniel, where you are a very small fish in a very big pond, and it can be quite intimidating or threatening. And in my first year of high school, I joined the wrestling team. And I was so small in my first year of high school, Daniel, although I was 14 years old, I only weighed 95 pounds. So what is that in kilos? That's about 30 kilos or 32 kilos, something like that, quite small. And so I was really worried about how small I was. I was worried about how much bigger all the other kids were, but I never talked about this because I was afraid that if I did, or if I let on, that I would be pushed aside socially. So I turned out to be pretty good at wrestling. And one day, after I had won my first two matches in wrestling, I was after practice outside the high school. And this was in the light of day. So it's setting, right, Daniel? It's the light of day. I'm surrounded by 20 or 30 people waiting in line for the bus. And all of a sudden, I feel this bump in the back of my leg. And I turn around to see what's going on. And there's a kid in my face with a knife in his hand, staring at me. And after a second of being in shock, it occurred to me that this boy had just tried to stab me with a knife out in public in front of witnesses. And this was so different from anything I had ever experienced in school prior to this. That kind of violence was just not part of my world until that moment. And as a result of that happening, I started to feel very much afraid. And the story just kept getting worse after that. Some people told me that this kid who I didn't know, who had tried to stab me, was a truly crazy person, that he owned guns, that he was going to try to shoot me. There were these crazy things happening I'd never experienced before. And so where the setting comes into play, Daniel, is that, again, here I am in high school and I'm this little kid and I'm feeling terrified, but I don't want anyone to see how afraid I feel, because in high school, that would be a surefire way for you to wind up on your own if people think you're not tough or you can't handle it. So while I was going through all of these terrifying experiences, I kind of kept to myself and I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't talk to my friends. I didn't talk to the school counselor. And so I started losing wrestling matches because I was just so afraid. But at the time, I didn't know what was happening. So I made this decision about myself when I started losing matches that I guess I just wasn't tough, that I just wasn't one of the kinds of people who can do hard things in life. And that decision that I made about myself became such a limiting factor in what I tried to accomplish in life after that point. Or times when I quit something because it started to get hard and I just knew I knew, and I'm saying that in quotes for those people who can't see me, because it wasn't true, but I really believed it was. And so the setting of high school was a huge part of how I came up with this limited view of myself and what I was capable of, that I had to overcome to be able to complete this 104-mile race up in the mountains. So I think setting is absolutely critical, and not just who you become in life, but how that happens, and then also how you break free.
Mr. Andrew, what are some of the major themes you are consciously explored while writing this book? Is it all about boundaries, curiosity, secrets, or belonging, loss, or perspective?
Yeah, so some of the key themes include, for example, this idea of taking on something that's deeply meaningful and seemingly impossible. And I think that's an incredible place in which to live your life, when there's something that calls to you, and to you it is meaningful intrinsically, not because, it might be a pathway to being successful, but because it's meaningful in and of itself. And yet for some reason it seems out of reach. Engaging in those kind of pursuits creates an incredibly meaningful experience of life. That's one of the main themes. Another theme of my book is about what I call a pit crew. And I use this term pit crew because, in Formula One racing and car racing, when they have to pull in and get their tires changed and whatever they need to have happen, they call that group of people who do all that for you your pit crew. And one of the things that happened in my experience of pursuing this goal was that people from my life who I didn't expect showed up to support me, both along the way and actually during the race. I had people drive 17 hours from the city where they lived to be there in Telluride with me, where I was riding this race, who were feeding me on the rest stops and even sometimes riding along with me so I didn't quit. And that really opened my eyes to how powerful it is to have a crew of people in your life who believe in your dreams and who show up for them, and to also be that kind of a human being for others, where you can see that something is meaningful to them and then you show up for it and you support them. You don't let them quit, and you don't let them quit on their faith that it's possible for them. So having a pit crew is one of the key themes. And I'll just mention one more. A third theme about this book is something that I call making the miracle mechanical. So I discovered during the course of this that what seemed to me like it would take a miracle to accomplish this 104-mile race was about 80 to 85% just mechanical things of doing this and then doing this and putting in the time and learning different things you need to know about the endeavor. But there was still 15 to 20% of what made it possible that was still in that domain of what I would call a miracle, something that you couldn't control, something that involved serendipity or timing. And so I thought it was fascinating that these things go from what seems like 100% miracle to mostly just mechanical and doing the work. But it's not 100% that, because it still takes some luck and it still takes timing and it still takes serendipity. So a third lesson from my book is, how do you take what seems like a miracle and make it mechanical without losing the miracle?
Yes, indeed, we need miracle in everyday lives. So, Mr. Andrew, as executive coach, as an author, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Short-term and long-term goals. Okay. So my short-term goal is in my business and with this book, I would like to get this book out on the market either by the end of this year or the first quarter of next year and get it into people's hands. It'll be my first book. So in and of itself, for me, it's a huge accomplishment. I always wanted to write a book, and now here we are in the final stages of editing the book. And for my business, one of the things we haven't talked about my business is which kind of founders I like to work with in particular. And I really work with two groups of people. I work with small business owners, who I love, and then I work with startup founders, companies that are trying, like Uber in the beginning, to build something that scales. With the startup founders I work with, I particularly like to focus on first-time founders with families who are doing something that is very impactful socially. I have clients who are tackling and have created a cure for treatment-resistant depression. I have other clients who are working on getting drugs to market faster for people who are ill. So in the short term, I want to, and I'm about to start working with someone in Kenya who is trying to put climate information in the hands of 100 million small farmers across the continent of Africa to help them get better yields from their crops, and to help feed the whole country. So I love working with founders who have these big visions that make a social impact, and I want to add to my roster of founders who are doing that kind of work. Long term, I have a new dream, okay? And this is now for me, Daniel, if I'm being totally honest, it's first of all so new, and it's also so big that it does seem to me like this is impossible. So this now is for me the new impossible thing. But long term, really my goal isn't about just growing my business. I want to create a cause or a movement or a nonprofit or something in that space that specifically addresses the issue of war and the way that it impacts children and families on the planet. And I've always been really emotionally affected by seeing the way in which war destroys the lives of children or kills children, tears apart families. And it's just horrible to me. And I was on a podcast last week and I was sharing about this. And one of the podcasters said, well, you should bring all these things you love together and maybe you could create something around bicycling and peace. And I thought, oh, pedaling for peace. Maybe I could create a movement called Pedaling for Peace, where I could get millions of people to ride across a country or across a continent, to raise awareness, to raise money, to try to impact war-torn areas or places where we haven't been able to find a solution to a peaceful outcome, and do something about that. To me, as I said, that seems like a completely fantastical thing for me, this guy in Austin, Texas, to do. But if I'm being honest, that's my new dream.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Andrew, and looking forward for that pedaling for peace. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be executive coach as well as an author?
For people who want to be an executive coach and as well as an author, is that what you said, Daniel?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, coaching is an interesting field because unlike psychology or medicine or accountancy or law, right now, there's no requirement that you have to go through any kind of certification process or educational curriculum. So it's a little bit like what we call here in the States the wild, wild west, which is the way we talked about the western part of our country back in the let's say 18th, 19th, 18th century before it was really kind of developed. So I think my advice to people would be, to be a great executive coach, you ideally have a deep, deep, deep experience with two things or three things. So I'll say three things. Number one, you have deep experience in running or being a part of running businesses. There's something about what that takes, which if you haven't done it yourself, I think you're missing key parts of the puzzle. So I think if you've not participated at a high level in growing and running a company, it's very challenging to be an executive coach. So that's one thing. The second thing is you need to have a deep, deep understanding of coaching itself and how it works. What is coaching insofar as it's different from, say, consulting or different from teaching? Because coaching is different from teaching and it is different from consulting. So I think it would be really good for people to get some experience in getting trained in how to coach. And then I think the third thing is, for becoming an executive coach, and this is true not just of executive coaching, but this is true of any business, it's very important to be very specific, or what they call niche down, around who you want to serve. Because it's such a big field, business executives, that it really helps to pick an ideal client, someone who you are uniquely equipped to support or to serve, and build your business around that very, very specific singular persona. Most people feel like if they don't serve lots of people, they'll have a hard time growing their business, but that's just not true. If you're one person in a world of 8 billion people, if you get very, very specific, it gets easier to grow your business and easier to serve people because you can speak directly to them and then you can begin to specialize in their problems. So that's the executive coaching side. To be an author, this is something that I personally think everyone should do this, whether you publish your book or not. And here's why. Because every human being has a story to tell. Every human being's life is a story that's being lived, that if you got into their experience, it's a unique experience of going through life. And so I feel like what I learned from writing this first book is that you don't even understand the meaningfulness of your own life and your own story until you've attempted to write it. And even if you're writing a piece of fiction, I still feel like you're going to draw from your own experience, your own life in such a way that you will come to learn something about yourself that I don't think you can learn any other way. And I say this as someone who has spent many, 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 many hours being coached, uncovering limiting beliefs, dealing with places in life where I have done things that I regretted, and cleaning up messes and going through counseling in a number of different modalities. So I've spent a lot of time developing myself, and none of those experiences gave me what writing this first book gave me in terms of my own understanding of the story that I'm living. So I cannot encourage you enough. If you're listening to this and you haven't yet started writing your first book, go do it. Whether it's a memoir or it's a how-to book or it's fiction, it'll change you as a person because it will teach you something about who you are. So all it really takes to write a book is to start, and then don't stop until it's done. Now, to write a good book takes a lot more than that, but to write a book, that's all it takes, and anyone can do that. So I can't encourage your listeners enough. Please go do that if you haven't done it. We'll get off this call,
Yes.
write an outline, come up with ideas, just get started, and then don't stop.
Yes, people, stop procrastinating. If you have the passion to write, and share to the world. And before we wrap up our discussion today, Mr. Andrew, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in 5th season, abstract poetry in 2nd season, and of course, my book 101 review in 5th season, comedy 101 in 2nd season, and my food 101 in its 5th season too. Geography 101 in 4th season, and my baby podcast, Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in 3rd season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in its 4th season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its 1st season. Please listen
Amazing.
to them.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Wow.
Please
So impressed.
listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. And Mr. Andrew, if you could personally hand over the gate to someone with one sentence, urging them to read it, what would that sentence be?
Urging them to read my book, Daniel?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I missed something. One sentence. This is a great challenge. It would be, if you have a dream that you're not acting on because you don't think it'll amount to something meaningful, you need to read this book because you're wrong.
Mhm. Very well said, Mr. Andrew, and we are looking forward for your upcoming book, Over the Gate. And thank you so much for sharing to the world. And can you please invite our listeners to support your upcoming book as well as your business itself?
Yes. So I would love for you to support my upcoming book and my business. The best way to connect with me is through my website, www.andrewpoles.com. On my website, you can get lots of free resources and you can sign up for my newsletter. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, where I'm on LinkedIn/in/Andrew Poles. And I also have a LinkedIn newsletter you can subscribe to where you'll get information and updates about the book.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Andrew Poles, because if you support him, more and more and more empowering coaching to come, more and more and more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been such a pleasure to be with you. You're a great host, and I am so impressed with your library of podcasts. Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much. More to come, people. See you soon.